Hello everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Wonder Room. I'm your host, King Vasser. Thank you all for watching. Today we have a special event. We are live and direct for the first time in 2 seasons to bring you the Season 7 team reveals. Normally this is a recorded show, but today, seeing as how it's a beautiful time with opening night right around the corner to reveal these teams, we're bringing it to you live and direct. So welcome back to Wonder Room and get ready to say hello to your teams in Season 7. Alright gang, you know how it goes as usual. 16 teams. You saw the GMs last week, so let's not waste any more time and get right on into it with our brand new teams. Out the gate, we have Aleph, the GM of the Ambrit Town Auroras, starting off their draft with a trio of OU-mons in Dragapult, Iron Crown, Como, very disgusting OU core if I say so myself. Picked up Terrakion in round 4, then went for some bulk Tentacruel Gastrodon, Azumarill, Mandibuzz, Suicune in rounds 5 through 9, Paldean Taurus Blaze, who we have not seen since Season 5, so it's nice to see that mon back into the fray. Lucario in round 11, very sneaky Lucario picked that late in the draft, and then Satitan as the final Pokemon to round out the draft. We haven't seen Satitan in the NWBA yet, so that's a really interesting decision. Opted for 4 Terra Captain. Satitan is water and ground, Gastrodon being poison and fairy, Taurus Paldean Blaze being grass and fairy, and Lucario as normal and fighting. It's a pretty well-rounded team, you know, good stats. You got a good combination of bulk and offense. Terra Captains, all pretty interesting. Obviously, we've seen Lucario and Taurus Paldean Blaze be very successful offensively in the past. Gastrodon has been very successful defensively. It's the Satitan that's interesting because there aren't any snow setters on this team. So it's interesting to see if Aleph opts for that mon just to have a nice bulky attacker in the back if the matchup calls for it or not. But either way, water and ground are pretty good choices. Pretty good team. What we know from Aleph in the past, they've been a great coach. So, you know, this is out the gate, a pretty strong team to have to look out for in the upcoming season. Next up, Galarian Blades, coach, or GM rather, of the Sir Chester Charizards. Fire types abound, and familiar faces as well. Open up the draft with Roaring Moon, one of the most threatening Pokemon in the entire format, and then immediately went to re-sign some mons that Blades employed last season. Torrentee, Mew, and Blaziken all rejoined the fray. Then went with Weezing and Ting Lu to help shore up that defense. Picked up regular Ogerpon, which was not originally Ogerpon. It's funny that we cover Aleph and Blades first because for the first time in NWBA history, there was actually a draft day trade. Straight up, UU picks Ogerpon for Azumarill. Pretty interesting trade on their parts. I think it benefits Blades' team certainly more as far as typing is concerned, but it's so early in the season that it's hard to tell whether that trade is going to be a good or a bad thing because teams haven't gotten the chance to play yet. By the way, it's interesting that that trade even happened at all. First draft day trade in NWBA history, which is really, really exciting. Registeel in round 8, Iron Jugulus, after a season of being a free agent, is drafted in round 9. Vaporeon, Monior, and Hitmontop to round out that draft. He opts to make Mew a Terra Captain once more, retaining that poison type but adding the fairy. Choosing Monior to be flying and rock, one of the few Pokemon to employ either stab type after the rule change, let alone both stab typings. And then Hitmontop being water and steel. Once again, pretty well-rounded team. There isn't any sort of like gimmick here. It's just these are mons I'm familiar with. Blades went 16-6 last season. We know he's a good player. So, you know, don't fix what isn't broken. Pretty sound strategy, all things considered. Third in the Ruby League, we have Earthflax, our second newcomer heading into the league, and as we said before, an associate of Aleph and Blades. Start off their draft with Gliscor Kirim. Two mons that might not even be legal in OU by the end of the season. We will have to see, but they are known for terrorizing the ladder. We'll see how well they're able to terrorize the draft league. Arcanine H in round 3. Poltegeist in round 4. Was drafted last season, but never got to see usage. We'll see if it gets usage this time around. Implement in round 5. A second Shell Smasher in Torterra in round 6. Sylveon in 7. Conkeldurr in 8. A very crucial Galvantula pick in round 9. And then shoring up the team with Salazzle, Tatsugiri, and round 12 Chronon. Really good value for a mon that powerful. Terra Captains are Arcanine H. Third time we've seen this mon. Third time it's a Terra Captain. This is a former MVP we're talking about. Opts for Terra Normal and Terra Grass. Grass, good for covering its weaknesses. And then Torterra being Water and Rock. This team's ploy should be pretty obvious. This is a disgusting Webs team. You got a lot of bulky attackers here. You've got some Cell Smashers. This is go, 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 go. We are not worried about playing the slow game. I am here to put holes in your team. Can you weather the storm, or do you have a way to hit me back harder? I don't think so. So that's the name of the game for Earthflax. Terrifying team on paper. We'll see how well they're able to pilot it, but just on pure offensive merit, one of the scariest teams in the league for sure. Next up, we have the Veilstone Valiants. Will once again in command of that team. Haven't talked about these logos too much, but you know, you can see that our GMs like to put forth their best effort. This one in particular is one of the 3 logos that Muffin has submitted for this season. If you are not familiar with Muffin's work, what are you doing? You've seen it season after season. Arguably the best out there as far as logos are concerned. In fact, personally, I would say it's not even arguable. But you know, once again, fantastic job on the logo. Will running it back. Same team, same branding. Started his draft with Heatran Primarina, Steel Fairy Core, never gets old, 2 very bulky attackers. Thunderous Tea in round 3. And then the gears started shifting. Slitherwing, Walking Wake, Screamtail, Torkoal, and Venusaur. 5 consecutive rounds in 3 to 8. And then on the back end, Crocodile, Quagsire, Hoopa Unbound, and Oricorio Pom Pom. The first time we have seen Oricorio in the NWBA. 4 Terra Captains, Crocodile being Poison and Dark, Oricorio being Ground and Steel, Screamtail being Normal and Steel, and Venusaur being Fire and Water. It's pretty goddamn obvious what this is. This is a Sun team, and boy howdy is it ever a Sun team. You're talking about 3 different Photosynthesis mons, Venusaur, the OG Chlorophyll Sweeper, a Heatran, a Thunder Seed that can press Weather Ball if it really needs to, and just in the event that he doesn't want to run Sun, this is still a very solid team, all things considered. So this is one of the most interesting archetypes we've ever seen in NWBA history, because we've seen Sun teams before, but never to this extent. This is foot on the gas. We are going all in on Sun. You know, we mentioned last week, Will sitting at 500, can he break the curse? We'll have to see, but on paper, this might be the best team that he's ever fielded. And that Season 1 team took him all the way to the championship. So, we'll have to see. But on paper, it's looking really good for Will. Next up, we have Flare back as Slitherwing Sicily, and the second logo that Muffin has made for the Draft League. Flare, of course, seeking redemption after last season's pretty poor results. And you can see it in the draft process. Starts with an Ogerpon Wellspring, followed by an Iron Moth, 2 great offensive Pokemon to start. Petulant Skarmory Chestnut, a very well-rounded defensive core in rounds 3 through 5. Tornadus Eye in round 6. Grimmsnarl in round 7. Some would say the most impactful, maybe valuable PUmon in the league. because of because of its prankster ability and how good it is at setting screens and being annoying. Cobalion, Alolan Muck in rounds 8 and 9, and then rounding out with Noivern, Espeon, and Komala, an interesting choice for PU. Only 2 Terra Captains, their 2 RUs in Chestnut being Ground and Dark, and then Noivern in Normal and Dragon. This is a very good defensive team. You're talking about Pecharunt, Skarmory, Chestnut, Cobalion, Alolan Muck, Grimmsnarl. Mons that cover a wide array of tiers. We'll see how well that works. Obviously, the Grimmsnarl is going to be the interesting one because when you throw up screens, you're probably going to want to run a more offensive team. But it's not like this team doesn't have hitters. Terra Noivern going full offensive, being Normal and Dragon. Espeon, Moth, Ogerpon are all very strong. The Webs team didn't work last season for Flare. Maybe the screen teams worked this time around. We'll have to see. But Flare is focused. They're ready. They're poised for a bounce back. We're excited to see if it can happen. And then we have, as we said last week, maybe the wild card of the entire league. Keith, GM of the Black City Pawnyards. And you want to talk about scary teams on paper. First 5 picks of the draft, maybe the strongest first 5 out of any team in the league. King Gambit, Rillaboom, Iron Hands, Regidrago, Manaphy. You're talking about demons of the past and the present. The most accomplished Pokemon in NWBA history with Regidrago. No King, no Zebby around. It's got to go to someone new. It goes to Keith. Pretty solid rest of the draft as well. You got Sandy Shocks in round 6, Hippowdon in round 7, Enamorous T in round 8, Big Roach in round 9, Porygon Z at 10, and then Veluza and Monkey Dory to round it out. Again, offensively, maybe the scariest team in the entire league. And that's not even getting into the Terra Captains. Regidrago, you know that thing's gonna be a Terra Captain. It's done the same thing for 3 seasons. It's not gonna change. Terra Dragon, Terra Steel. It's worked every time. It's got 2 MVPs in Gen 9 alone. Why change what isn't broken? You know how it works. Porygon Z, the interesting ones, Fire and Ghost, didn't opt for Terra Normal, but the Terra Fire at the very least is gonna cover Steel types that Porygon Z normally has a hard time hitting. Wo-Chien being Flying and Poison. Obviously, Terra Poison Wo-Chien was an all-star last season as a defensive mon. So again, going with what works. And then Veluza, an MVP candidate in Season 5. Water and Fairy. So, again, offensively, this team is terrifying. Defensively, you have mons that are really, really good at the defense they cover in Hippowdon and Wo-Chien. And you still have a lot of bulk on the table, so this team can take some hits even if they don't have what many consider to be standard defense. So, an on paper disgusting team in the hands of the ultimate wildcard, who knows what that's going to result in, but Keith is probably one of the more exciting teams on paper for people to look forward to this season, so it's going to be fun seeing what he can cook up in what looks to be a very stacked Ruby League. Next up, we have Z, coached by Chris. Not many people employing a coach this season, but Z and Chris running it back. Had a lot of success in the back half of last season. They want to parlay that luck into this season, see if they can't keep that momentum going. Starting off with a Masquerade round 1, Moltres in round 2, Raging Bolt in round 3, so covering all 3 of those OUs right off the bat. Toxapex Don Fan following for some good defense. Azelf, some would say an MVP snub in Sinistra in round 7. The always annoying Klefki in round 8. A very late Cleavor pick in round 9. And then rounding out with PUs in Cryogonal, Quillfish H, and Bronzong. And with those PUs, Z decided to make them all Terra Captains. Cryogonal being Electric and Fairy, Quillfish being Water and Grass, Bronzong being Water and Fighting. The big key here, what I personally believe is going to put this team over the top or not, Terra Captain Sinister. You saw just how devastating and annoying this mon was for a lot of teams, how easy it was to get the setup sweep last season. And that wasn't even as a Terra Captain. Poison and Fairy, both really good defensive types. Obviously, Poison being really good for the fact that one of the few ways to really stop Sinister is to Toxic it. So that's really going to be what carries Z through the season. But there are so many other good pieces to this team. Again, very well-rounded. Covers a lot of bases. Gets a lot of utility out of those PU picks. Not to say that Z is a sleeper by any means, because again, was one set away from making the playoffs last season. But with what looks to be an improved draft compared to last season, and having the knowledge and improved ability from last season, a sleeper run of the championship, as long as the luck doesn't turn bad, is not off of the table. And then our final team in the Ruby League, we have Zach, coached by Dom. Dom, of course, the most successful sustained coach in NWBA history. 3 out of his 4 clients have made it all the way to the NWBA finals, and the 4th client still made the playoffs, so his track record is immaculate. Zach rebranding to the Sunny Shore Sparks, starting off his draft with Glamour Corviknight, very annoying both in terms of setting hazards and removing hazards, 2 of the best in the game at that. And then going full force on offense. Greninja, Mamoswine, Comfey, Gengar, Zapdos, G. 5 really strong offensive bonds, considering that none of them are OU. Went for an EX Clodsire, so that's a really fun defensive core. You're talking about Corv, Claude, that's a stall classic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Zach's running a stall team, of course. And then, in the back third of his draft, picking up Goodra, Araquanid, Pawmot, and Serena. So, on paper, some really good defense. Nice webs to help make mons like Mamoswine and a potential offensive Goodra put in a lot of work. Went for 4 Terra Captains, Gengar with the Fighting Dark, Araquanid with Bug and Ghost, not necessarily Water, a bit of a surprise, but an offensive Terra on a mon that's typically defensive. It's still interesting, you know, can swing the tide of the battle by bringing weird sets. Goodra going for Dragon and Steel. And then Pawmot going for Electric and Fairy. Of course, everyone knows about that Terra Electric Double Shock, hits like a truck. And again, on a Webb's team, on paper, it's going to do a lot of damage when it's Adamant Bandit, that's all I'm saying. One of the more interesting teams, a bit weird, you know, Terra Captains are an interesting decision. Comfey being as high as it is without being a Terra Captain means that it's not going to get nearly as much value as you would typically see, but Comfey is still a good defensive mon. Doesn't always have to be Calm Mind, Life Orb, Triage shenanigans. So, still a very well-balanced team at the end of the day. We know that for periods of time, Zach has shown really high play. You pair him with a really, really good coach like Dom, anything can happen. Can Zach meet the heights of Dom's first 3 clients? We'll have to wait and see. It's certainly possible, especially in the draft league like this. And with that, that is your Ruby League for Season 7. We move on now to the Sapphire League. We start with 2010 AZ, shortened to just AZ, GM of the Little Root Low Kicks. Has hired Coach Silame from outside of the NWBA sphere, but always welcome to see new faces. Starts off the draft with Garchomp Cinderace, feeling very similar to Lavender Town in Season 5, that exact core. Got Logan all the way to the Final Four. Picks up the mascot Low Kicks in round 3. Alolan Ninetales in round 4. Necrozma, Quaquaval, Volcanion, and Latios in rounds 5 through 8. That's a really, really strong really do it on both sides core in that part of the draft, especially considering that Latias was an EX pick, Quavel is a UU Mon. That's really, really good value. AZ definitely doing his homework, knowing his stuff. Back 4 being a Lowland Sandslash Mon that we haven't seen in Gen 9. Indeedee Male in a proper tier, some would say. Ditto in round 11. Of course, that's always the ultimate wild card of a Pokemon. Why would I draft a specific Pokemon when I can just draft all of yours? And then Dragalge as the final pick. Only 2 Terra Captains. Opts to make Latias. Terra Poison, Terra Fairy. Typically, OU Terra Captains see the most bans out of any Pokemon. So I would like to think that Latias is not going to see many games. But when it does hit the field, it's going to be a nasty scene. And then the Alolan Sandslash being fire and flying. Pretty good types to cover itself. Offensively, pretty strong. There isn't a lot of sure defense on this team. Gonna have to make some things work, like Tank Chomp or bulky Spinner Quavel, AV, Dragalge, things like that nature. But there is a good amount of bulk to go around on this team that AZ can make it work. Obviously, having Aurora Veil changes everything. So, plus the Psychic Terrain, there's a lot of weird things going on at once. We'll see what AZ's cooking up, but this has the potential to get really nasty because it's hard to tell what this team is even really going to do. And we're talking about a player that we've never heard of before. So, again, wildcard team, don't really know what they're capable of, don't really know what they're going to do, but it's going to be fun to figure it out as we get into the season. Next up, Ball Heat returns as the GM of the Heart Home Heaters. Keeps the same branding, same logo and everything, and many of the same faces as well. Again, when you make it to the playoffs, you feel like you had a good season. Why change what's not broken, right? Starts off his draft by getting Samurott H again. Took it in the first round last season. Getting Excadrill in round 2 and then Salamence in round 3. Some old heads that have seen their time in Ubers and dominating OU. Picks up the mascot, familiar face Infernape in round 4. Raikou in round 5, and somewhat early Florges in round 6. Fortress in round 7, goes for another familiar face in Okidogi in round 8. Obviously, everyone remembers what this Mon did in primetime last season. Hoopa in round 9, Porygon 2 in round 10, so one of the few teams that does have more than 2 PUs. And then a very sneaky strategy, picks up Iron Boulder and Tyranitar in the back 2. So, first 10 rounds, pretty solid team. Obviously focus a little bit more on the defensive side in that backstretch, but, still pretty solid all around. And then takes 2 rock types, including the Premier Sandsetter, to end out the draft. And then you remember that he took Excadrill in round 2, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a Sand Team. We haven't seen someone attempt the Sand Team since Azure Bay in Season 4. So, we'll see how often Ball Heat runs it. But, gotta commend the attempt at the very least to go for something off the beaten path. As for the Terra Captains, Salamence, Water and Steel, Raikou, Ice and Ghost, Florges, Grass and Steel, and then Hoopa, Ghost and Dark. Really, really nasty set of Terra Captains. Salamence covering its own weaknesses very well. Raikou, obviously, Bolt Beam for 3 Terra points is nothing. That's free real estate. Florges being Grass and Steel, still covering itself very well. And then Grass being very solid. And also, you notice the fact that Heart of Home doesn't have a Grass type naturally. But Florges is a very good defensive Mon. So that being a Terra Grass helps shore up that issue. And then you have Hoopa, Ghost and Dark. We know how strong this mon is offensively already. So, Ball Heat, very good last season. Didn't get as far as he wanted to, but has a lot of the same core, some of his best mons back, as well as some fresh new faces. Again, if he runs sand, or if he doesn't run sand, doesn't really matter. This is a good player, looks like a good team. We'll see just how far Ball Heat can make it this time, considering that he is likely to be on most people's list of true championship contenders. Next up, we have the GM that we talked about last week, that we haven't seen since season 1. Beku, GM of the Mistral Metagross, hires Vasser as a coach, so he gets his feet wet into the coaching atmosphere. Starts the draft off with Great Tusk in round 1, Jax's Speed in round 2, Latios in round 3, Rotom in 4, Phasandipity Tinkaton in 5-6, so that's a good 3 mons in a row with great defensive value. Chinchino in round 7, one of Beku's favorites, one of the few mons that he used in season 1 that he was actually able to get back this season. Shaman in round 8, the unofficial NWBA playoff MVP in season 6. So hey, that mon's a champion, was a big part of a championship team. That looks like a good strategy to me. Bring it on over. Chandelure, Umbreon, Tornadus Eye, and then an EX on Lycanroc Dusk to round out the draft. Terra Captains being Chandelure, Fire and Grass, Shaman, Ground and Fairy, Tornadus Eye, Ground and Steel, and then Umbreon, Water and Poison. The name of the game for this team is Raw Speed. This team is fast. Even without the Oxus Speed, the speed tiers on this team is crazy. So we'll see how this works for a GM that is, relative to the rest of the league, pretty inexperienced, but has one of the better players in NWBA history as his coach. We'll see what they're able to cook up together. And again, we're talking about this draft league. Anything can happen. With a team this fast, you just don't really know what's going to happen. You're talking about mons that can set up, mons that can just hit you right out the gate. Interesting mix. We'll see what they're able to cook up with that. Next up, you have CJ back for his 3rd season. GM of the Kitakami Slashers. Stays in Kitakami, but rebrands, and the 3rd of Muffin's lovely logos on the season. CJ once again pivoting his strategies. Obviously, his last 2 drafts really haven't been that great, but this one looks like the winner for him. Starts off with Gargasalt, Weavile in round 2, Enamorous Eye in round 3, so right off the board, 3 very strong OUs. Metagross and Hydrapple, 2 very good bulky attackers. Mousehold in round 6. Mousehold wasn't seen last season, or really in season 5 much at all. Only played 1 or 2 sets, so we'll see how long Mousehold lasts this time around. Entei Cresselia in 7 and 8. Meloetta, a late Rabombi in round 10. And then Braviary H, and then the mascot at the end of the draft, Typhlosion H in round 12. Terra Captains, another team with 4 of them. Entei being normal and dark. Cresselia being fighting and poison. Meloetta being normal and fighting. Interestingly, did not opt for Fairy, but both of those are very good offensive Terras from Meloetta, so we'll see how that goes and how often CJ brings them on, considering it is a PU Terra Captain. And then Braviary H with Fire and Fairy. Like we said before, CJ hasn't really had the best of luck drafting, and that's really what's been tanking his seasons. This is, on paper, easily the best draft he's had. Will that finally translate to the success he's looking for? We'll have to see. We have seen the improvements as a player. It looks like the improvements as a team is coming along. You add those together, sounds like a playoff contender to me. Next up, we have Kobe, once again located in Humalau. hasn't left, doesn't ever plan on leaving. It's worked really well for him. Although rebrands away from the Haxorus and opts to go for the swim team. But being in Humalot for so long, there are certain mons that have just never left his company. And he brings back some familiar faces through his draft. He starts off with Golden Go Iron Valiant, a crazy top 2 to have. Having the luxury of picking first in the second round. Probably the best top 2 out of anyone's draft in the league. You're talking about 2 mons that have been considered ban-worthy threats over on the Smogon side of things. Then goes for the double Dragon Core Haxorus Hydreigon. So Haxorus once again under Kobe's employment after a down season last season. And then brings in Hydreigon to help out. And then the triple Regenerator Core of Reuniclus, Mienshao, Slowbro. Kobe's been able to use all these mons before in the past effectively. And 3 Regenerators on the same team is despicable work and can be very frustrating for teams, especially considering that there's some pivot shenanigans going on with them as well. Incineroar in round 8 to add to that pivot nonsense. Ursaluna EX in round 9, very late Ursaluna. Swampert in 10, Toxtricity, and then Houndstone to round out his draft. This team is bulky offense to a T. The 3 Regenerators, mons like Ursaluna, Swampert, Houndstone. A lot of very strong mons in this team, and they don't really care if you hit them first, because they're going to hit you back, and it's going to hurt. Terra Captains, obviously he goes all in on Haxorus, as per usual, but can get ground and steel, but has normal and ice on Toxtricity, 2 fantastic offensive options, and then fighting and fairy on Houndstone. So, again, we're talking about someone who made it all the way to Game 5 of the NWBA Finals in Season 2, the only GM in NWBA history with multiple 20-win seasons. It's a strong team. Kobe is known for really picking up steam and outplaying the hell out of his opponents in the back half of the season. Said last week, strong contender for a potential title. Team looks to back it up. All you got to do now is go out there and play mons. Following up with that, we have Like an Egg opting for the nickname Hatch for the season. GM of the Nat Queen City Clan Portals. And I just got to say, one of the prettiest logos we've ever seen. Wouldn't blame you if you thought this one was also Muffin, but no, this one was from an outside source. But once again, just hats off. Beautiful, beautiful logo. Absolutely. Hatch, pretty interesting team. Starts off the draft with Iron Treads. Very odd choice in round 1. People very rarely opt to go for a more defensively oriented mon. Granted, Iron Treads can do it offensively if it really chooses to. Slowking G Skeledirge in rounds 2 and 3 before picking up Zarude in 4. Gudra H in 5. Gyarados in 6. Diancie in 7, Breloom in 8, and EX on Blissey in 9. And then a trio of PU mons with Scyther, Sableye, and Uxie in the final 3 rounds. Opts to make Terra Captains in Skeledirge, Water and Fairy, Scyther, Normal Ground, and Uxie Electric Fairy. Oddly enough, doesn't go for Terra on Sableye. Is that a hint that mon might be on the move? We don't know. Either way, very annoying team to deal with. Extremely bulky. There's a lot of very good defense. You're talking about one of the best unaware mons in the business in Skeledirge, Slowking G, AV Extraordinaire, Diancie. We know how good that mon is in Draft League. Blissey, the special wall of all time. Sableye, Uxie, both extremely annoying. This is going to be a very frustrating team for teams to try to break through. It looks as if Hatch's strategy is to methodically break through teams. And there are still some strong Pokemon on here, don't get us wrong. Obviously, you have Zarude, Gyarados, Breloom right out the box can hit you super hard. Treads can be a good setup sweeper. Gudra H has enough firepower. You can slap a Specs on that thing and do some damage. So we'll see how Hatch plays it. We've never really seen someone really lean all the way into being a defensive team, but this looks like the one on paper. We'll have to see how it goes in the course of the actual season. Next up, Nico. Talked about him last week. You know what he's back for. Rebrands, once again, going back to New Moon, but this time as the New Moon Dark Rise. If I had a nickel for every time I've seen a team opt for Darkrai branding playing in New Moon Island, I'd have 2 nickels. Not a lot, but hey, it's happened twice. Nabbing the mascot, round 1. Taking Dragonite Clefable rounds 2 and 3 to polish out that OU core. Caesar in round 4, Superior 5, Keldeo 6, and this is where you start to notice the trend. Takes Keldeo, Jirachi, and Overquill back to back to back. Once again, somebody who is familiar with these mons. They were all great pieces of Nico's championship run team from last season. Didn't get it done, of course, at the very end, but as we've said time and time before, why fix what ain't broken? Rotom Heat, Bramblegas, Dreadnought, Mudsdale to round out the team. 4 Terra Captains, Jirachi, Water Fairy. You saw the type of damage this thing was doing out the gate last season, so as a Terra Captain, who knows what this thing is possible of now? Dreadnought as Water Dark as the undercover Shell Smasher on this team. Rotom Heat, Ice and Steel, and then Mudsdale, Water and Poison. On paper, nowhere near as disgustingly good as this team from last season, but we are talking about one of the best players in the league. Still a very good team on paper, just nowhere near as overwhelming. But that doesn't mean they can't be undercover just as good. It's never great to underestimate Mons. Obviously, he's got plenty of setup sweepers. Superior is always going to be an interesting option, especially because he didn't opt to make it a Terra Captain, but figured he would get more value by making his lower tier Mons Terra Captains. He can get to the championship. He can win. We'll just have to see if it actually happens this time. And then the final team in the Sapphire League, Sari no Mi, GM of the Mauville Milotics. This logo was actually handled by our very own commissioner, I have to say. Did a very good job of it, so hats off to Dom. Sari, unfortunately, was not available to draft. In fact, there were concerns that Sari would not even show up this season. Hadn't heard from them since signups. Unfortunately, it had to do with a family emergency. It happens. It affected critical season last season, but Sari has been able to get in contact with our commissioner, so there are going to be available for this season. We're still hammering out the details, of course, but we welcome Sari with open arms once again. As such, they did not get a chance to announce their Terra Captains. Again, the details will be hammered out later. We would like to think the league is only going to be fair and give Sari their fair shake at adopting Terra Captains. Again, because they missed the draft, they had to go the usage route. We saw this before in Season 5, where Trey, GM of the Humalao City Hooligans, wasn't able to draft, so his team just went by the usage rates from the last time the Smogon ladder posted. But still a pretty solid team, all things considered. If Mon is a high in usage in a tier, then it's probably going to be pretty good in that tier. Zamazenta H, Landorus Therian as a first 2, Hatterene in 3, Zapdos, Ogerpon, Cornerstone, Slowking as a UU core in 4, 5, 6, Saclazar, Mimikyu in 7, 8, Flygon and Talonflame in 9, 10, and then Decidueye, Arcanine in round 10. Again, it's hard to really speculate on this team because this was not a drafted team. This was essentially auto-generated. We have no idea what Sari is going to do with this team. How many free agency decisions or trades they're going to try to make, what they make for Terra Captains. But on paper, you still have all the bases covered. There's some good defense here. There's some great offense, especially near the top. You have the ultimate utility mon in Cyclizard. You got hazard, some decent hazard clearance, which a lot of teams don't really have. It all comes down to what Sari presents as a GM and when the league allows her to reacclimate into the thick of things. And with that, you have your Season 7 teams. Great teams on paper, a lot of really great logos, an interesting batch of GMs. We're all really excited to see how it goes down this season. And with that, we move on to the Week 1 schedule. You know we have to cover it even live. As per usual, Week 1, all intra-league. So, truthfully, one of the two most important weeks in the season, because you're playing all your league opponents, that will allow you to get so much of a head-to-head start in the tiebreakers on the rest of your league. Some really interesting matchups right out the gate. You have CJ getting a rematch with Nico. They played Week 1 on Versus Seeker last season. Very good match that CJ managed to score the upset. A lot of the newer GMs get to face off, like Keith and Earthflax, which should be an absolute heater of a match. And we have two slated for Versus Seeker. Out the gate, we have Sir Chester and Ambrit Town. So two of the Europeans going toe-to-toe, Blades and Aleph. They were coach and GM last season. They're rivals this time around. And then our main event of the evening, the playoff match that never was, the Diss Track Classic, as some call it. Ball Heat and Nico get to go toe-to-toe. So that's going to be really exciting. We'll see what Ball Heat has in store. Obviously, we're all excited. I can't even pick a favorite. I'm not going to tell you who I think is going to win. I just want to see good Pokemon. And with that, that ends it for today's episode of Wonder Room Live. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. We hope you enjoyed seeing all the team reveals. We are going to send you over to Dom very shortly. He is live. It's Versus Seeker night. You know how this goes? You know what time it is. So once again, thank you all for watching. Stick around, stay tuned. Opening night, Season 7, coming up next. 2 heaters on Versus Seeker. This is your host, King Vasser, saying so long for now. We'll see you soon for more NWBA content. And welcome to Season 7.